Hello everyone, and welcome to my playthrough of Oxygen Not Included, where I'm going to be showing you how to establish a base that will last you all the way from early game until the ultra late game. For this particular playthrough, I'm going to be playing on survival setting, on the Terra asteroid, with no particular role gen. I don't find that the duplicant's particular skill sets are all that important for establishing a functional base. I will be choosing a farmer and 2 researchers to make things a bit easier on myself. But as long as none of my duplicants have loud sleeper, which they don't, I'm more or less just good to go. As someone who's had the opportunity to build many late game bases in the past, I already have a basic idea of how my base is likely to end up. However, following the specifics of my base design is not important. You can build your base in virtually any way you'd like and be successful as long as you cover the basics of your colony. In this particular video, I'm going to be showing you how to get through some basic research and establish sustainable food, oxygen, and power. So after increasing the speed to fast by pressing tab twice, I'm going to look around my base and check to see what sort of potential resources are available or what potential hazards I need to avoid. So the first thing I notice is that there's a large area of carbon dioxide off to the right of my base. Carbon dioxide can be quite useful in later game, but in the early and mid game is more or less just a hassle. In fact, your base has no way of dealing with carbon dioxide in the early game other than walling it off or digging out a space for it to occupy. So I'm not going to be digging out here and unleashing this into my base. Water, on the other hand, is extremely useful and is required for a lot of the basic necessities of your base. So once I have, let's just take out a small area so I can show you, some resources available, I'm going to be establishing a pitcher pump over here, which allows my duplicants to bottle water and transport it where it's required, although this is not my first priority quite yet. Additionally, these large sections that are walled off from my base contain a lot of oxygen. Oxygen is required for your duplicants to be able to breathe, which makes it extremely useful. And very quickly you'll notice that you need to establish a sustainable oxygen supply. Typically you use algae and oxygen diffusers and some power to make oxygen, but we can avoid this need for a while by just digging into these areas and letting the oxygen flow into our base. Finally, there's a lot of plants around this base, which is extremely useful and is going to be vital for surviving until I can establish my own renewable food supply. So soon I'm going to be building a ladder up into this area and telling my dupes to harvest these various wild plants as they mature. The harvest muckroot is only a one-time harvest, provides a good amount of food, but once it's gone, it's gone. Bristle blossoms are moderately useful. They provide good food, however they require constant illumination in order to grow, which you can get from shine bugs. This makes them inconsistent as wild plants. However, these mealwood plants are extremely useful. They're going to grow forever, and as long as I'm willing to just use the little bit of food that's coming off of these mealwood plants, I'll be able to drastically extend the longevity of my own food, which just consists of 16,000 calories of nutrient bars. Each of your duplicants require 1,000 calories per cycle to survive, which means this is not going to last very long, and a renewable source of food is going to be required very quickly. So, start the base by having duplicants dig up into the top. By pressing Y, you can check and uncheck your auto harvest on various plants. So for all the plants except for the buried muckroot, as you can see here with this little red top, I'm going to have the auto harvest available because buried muckroots do not reharvest, and I don't want the buried muckroots to rot by picking them up right now. And finally, because not all of my duplicants will be able to build this at the same time, I'll have my extra 2 duplicants building an outhouse, or a pair of outhouses, so they don't end up relieving themselves on the floor and leaving a puddle of polluted water. So we can see that only one duplicant is going to be able to operate on this ladder structure at a time, and these other duplicants are almost done their outhouse task. So I'm going to start setting them to build out some rooms to allow them to do some basic power production, as well as some basic research. While you might see that I'm going to be digging very close to this carbon dioxide, as long as you keep one tile in between your base and it, the oxygen or the carbon dioxide will not be able to flow into your base. Additionally, you might notice some of these sand deposits around, and these provide one of the biggest hazards to new players in Oxygen Not Included. Sand that's uncovered from below will fall, unlike most other materials, which ends up creating an impassable piece of terrain at the bottom of wherever they fall. This can trap duplicants and cause them to suffocate very quickly, and it can also trap duplicants outside of your base, leaving them in a hazardous area. So it's imperative to make sure that you clear these out as they appear, and as you're building, watch out for sand deposits. So here I'm just setting up a few areas that my duplicates are able to build some machines. And while building over here will access this area with all the carbon dioxide, the top, by pressing F1, you can have a look and see it's all oxygen. So even if it were to start flowing into my base, we would only receive the good oxygen that we would like. Very quickly, I'm also going to be building some tiles here that will block off the flow. So even once some of this gas is flowed through, we'll be stopping the remaining gas, the carbon dioxide, from flowing through. You can see that these mealwoods are almost finished growing, which means in about a cycle's time, we're going to get some free food. Now that I've built some area for my duplicants to occupy, I'm going to begin building some basic power production as well as research facilities. Power production more or less relies on manual generators at the beginning. Oh, some sand fell. I'm going to increase the priority by pressing P and changing to a higher number, which tells my duplicants that this is a much more important job. Alright. At the beginning of the game, there's not very many options for power generation. You click your power tab, you see only 3 options: a manual generator, wires, and batteries. Manual generators have your duplicants sit on essentially a hamster wheel and run in place, taking up all of their ability to do work in exchange for 400 watts of power. If I remember correctly, yes. That power is useless unless it is directly applied to other machines or stored. Directly applying machines means that anytime a machine wants to run, you have to have at least one duplicant on your hamster wheels. So to save time, you can place down batteries, which are essential for an effectively running base, and connecting everything up with wires. Now when the battery is less than full, your duplicants will come and run on the hamster wheel until the battery is full. And as any buildings in your base require power, they will draw directly from the battery, which reduces your duplicants' need to be always on the hamster wheel. As you can see at the top left, there is a picture of your asteroid. And this small gray section is the section where duplicants typically fall asleep. Just a little bit before this section comes about, your duplicants will take care of their basic needs, such as going to the bathroom in our outhouses, or taking showers, or eating. You can change the duplicate cycles by going to the Schedule tab at the top right, and assign them to go to their bathroom breaks, or eat, or go to the recreation areas, or to sleep, wherever you would like. However, it's not very important to change this until you have many more duplicants, where they might be competing to use the same bathrooms or the same areas for eating all at the same time. Alright, so we have access to power. The next thing we want to use with our power is place down some research stations. This will allow us to unlock additional buildings for our base, and is going to be key for our survival. In addition, I'll be placing a storage bin next to these research facilities once I move them slightly over to the right. And the reason I do that is because these research stations require dirt for their operation. Rather than having my duplicants run to grab a piece of dirt that's sitting on the ground every time they want to start building, I'm going to have my duplicants put the dirt into the storage bin for storage in the meantime, and then anytime they want to research and they don't have enough dirt, they only need to look slightly to the left, pick up the dirt, and place it into the machine, reducing a lot of travel time, where duplicants might only be picking up small amounts of dirt and bringing it all the way over here. Instead, they can pick up much larger amounts of dirt and bring them to the storage bin. So let's go with cultivatable soil, check dirt. We're going to increase the priority of this to 6. The basic priority for everything in your base, if you click P and check, is 5, meaning everything with a level 5 priority is just as likely as some other task with a level 5 priority, with some nuances to the system of being completed. Placing this on priority 6 means that your duplicants will necessarily want to complete the task of bringing whatever is allowed into this storage bin before they do other tasks. So you will very quickly pick up all of the dirt in your base or anywhere accessible to your duplicants, and they will bring it and put it into the storage bin. Additionally, I'm going to be increasing the priority on these research areas, as they are extremely vital, to 7, so that your duplicants will focus on research and making sure the research is completed as quickly as possible. As my duplicates begin their research, I'm going to start focusing on food production. The only thing that is extremely vital for your research at the beginning of the game is your food production, because there isn't very much food available around your main base. So I'll start by telling them to queue up both basic farming as well as meal preparation, which will allow me to not only grow my own food, but then prepare it into much more palatable food. And the duplicants begin doing their research. So this section might take a while. So what I like to do as I'm building my base, and usually what I do from the very beginning, is to click Alt-Z, which enables super speed on your game. Super speed tells the game to run as fast as your computer is able to handle, rather than at these 3 basic speeds that come standard with the game. The larger and more complex your base, the slower super speed will run, and the more powerful your computer is, the faster it will run. Here with this very basic beginner base, where we can see very little of the map, there isn't much going on, and so you can run the game quite quickly. We have an unused duplicant, so I'm going to have them start doing some other useful tasks that need to be done eventually, such as clearing out these areas. And placing some basic beds. Beds will allow me, my duplicants, to recover their stamina more quickly and improve morale if you use them to construct your area into a bedroom. By going up to the top right and going all the way to the right in the overlays, or by pressing F11, you can look at the room tab. Any area that's gray is considered a miscellaneous room and has no bonuses. If you want to have a room that has bonuses, all you need to do is hover over the particular room. It will tell you the required items in the room. For example, for the latrine, you need a toilet, a wash station, nothing industrial, and you have a minimum and maximum size. Walling off a room using doors and tiles with that particular size and those items will give you a bonus. In this case, the effect is a morale +1. So any duplicant who uses this room to go to the bathroom within the last cycle will have a +1 to the morale in future cycles. This is going to become very useful, although right now isn't particularly necessary. But I will, however, build this into a room. Let's leave this one. first 2 researches have been completed, which means I can start my own food production, which I'm going to start basically immediately. Another important note about tiles that I'm building, you might notice that there are already walkable structures here. Like this sandstone is perfectly valid for your duplicants to walk on. However, if you build tiles, your duplicants get a walk speed bonus of 25%, meaning over time it becomes much more necessary to have tiles everywhere because it really improves your duplicate's ability to move around. It's not super necessary right now, but I like to get out of the way. Additionally, I'm going to build this room over a little bit more because I anticipate my structure to have 8 duplicants. So I'm going to make enough room for 8 dupes into this room and then start building farms on the left side. So that's 5 rooms, 6, 7, 8. Build a ladder up right there. Building access to this water over here with the pitcher pump I talked about at the beginning. And print something from the printing pod. So let's look at what's available. Typically at the beginning of your game, especially if you're new, I would highly recommend against getting additional duplicants. While it makes your game faster by having more available labor, and it is definitely more fun to have additional duplicants, it's very easy for your duplicants to overwhelm your ability to produce the required oxygen, food, power, and other resources required for your duplicants to survive. So I often choose whatever available additional material. Usually there's 3 duplicants and something else that might be useful. However, in this case, I am going to go with additional duplicants because I would just like the additional speed. So nobody has mouth breather. Narcoleptic is a little bit annoying. I know I'm going to need a lot of farming, and ranching is also going to be super useful in the next few videos. So I think I'm going to go with the ranching duplicate. Something you may notice about the cots is that up until the moment I just began talking about them, the cots were all grayed out. Here you can see a cot that's much more vibrant in color, much brighter, and one that's gray. Cots can be assigned to individual duplicants, which means you can force duplicants to sleep in particular areas, which is useful if, say, you have a duplicant whose job is mainly to run on a hamster wheel. You might want them to have a cot that's close to the hamster wheel, rather than a cot that's in some other section of the base that you've built somewhere far away. If you don't assign a duplicant to any particular cot, when the first night comes that the cots are available, they will choose one of the cots, and that is now their cot. You can reassign them to other cots, but they will always stay in the cot that they've chosen for themselves until you reassign them. So here I'm just going to queue up a second important research, which is getting the advanced research, which will allow me to actually access the much more important researches later on in the game. This is not super vital immediately, but it's nice to get things done quickly. So you might notice that my duplicants are often running back to these hamster wheels to try and provide additional power for my base. And this is interrupting whatever task they're taking. So if they're building ladders over here, or say taking out some dirt over here, they interrupt that task, run over to these hamster wheels, and then have to run all the way back, which is quite tedious and takes up a lot of my available manpower. So to avoid this issue, what I can do is go to my hamster wheels and force them to only activate when my battery is less charged. So right now, when my battery reaches 50% charge, meaning that these 2 research stations have used up half of the power in this battery, then these hamster wheels will begin requesting in the background for my duplicants to come and start filling up the battery. what I can do is reduce this number, meaning they have to wait longer for this battery to drain, which reduces the number of trips that they're going to take, because the battery will be more empty when they come, and they'll be able to do more work before returning. Additionally, what I can do is build extra batteries. This is going to be extremely useful, and actually I will build one more battery right next to my research stations. Usually I build all my batteries right next to the manual generators and replace them with coal generators afterwards, but because of this carbon dioxide in this early build, I don't feel like building them all over here and doing something fancy to get rid of the carbon dioxide. Alright, so I'm going to finish off this room here for the 8 duplicates I'm intending to have. I'll delete these sections of ladder to allow me to place tiles. And once these tiles have been placed, the room will be finished and I'll get a decor bonus or a morale bonus for any of the duplicates that sleep in this room. Outhouses, if you check by hovering over top, have a number of visits remaining. They start, I believe, at 14 visits, and each time an outhouse is used, the visits go down. Once the visits have been totally used up and 0 visits remain, the outhouse is out of order until a duplicate comes to unclog the outhouse. This releases some less than savory materials onto the floor, which isn't a huge deal, but duplicates that don't have access to any outhouse will relieve themselves on the floor, which leaves puddles of polluted water, which puts polluted oxygen into the air and can be quite the hazard for your base if you're unprepared for it. So it's important, once your duplicates have used the outhouse a few times, to increase the priority in your outhouses so that your duplicates will unclog them before they start spilling themselves on the floor. Periodically, I find it's useful to pause your base and look around to make sure there's no issues creeping up on you. So for a while I've noticed that the air at the bottom of my base, instead of being a pleasant blue, like at the top, has become darker. By clicking the oxygen overlay at the top right, a very useful tab, or pressing F1, we can notice that the oxygen has been replaced with carbon dioxide. This is exactly the problem we were trying to avoid by not digging into this area here, with all this carbon dioxide. The reason we have this carbon dioxide pooling inside our base is because your duplicates, in addition to using oxygen, give off carbon dioxide at a rate of 2,000 milligrams, or 2 grams every second. Each of your cycles takes 600 seconds, meaning each duplicate is going to give off 1.2 kilograms of carbon dioxide every cycle, which eventually needs to be dealt with. In addition, your duplicates require 100 grams per second of oxygen, meaning 60 kilograms of oxygen is required every cycle, which can rapidly deplete your oxygen supplies if you don't have some renewable resource. So, to deal with the accumulating carbon dioxide, which I'm going to vote as more pressing than our lack of food, I'm going to dig downwards and open up a space, which gives room for this heavy carbon dioxide, which, because oxygen not included, is a fairly realistic physics simulator. The heavy carbon dioxide will sink to the bottom and replace the oxygen here. And this high pressure oxygen will also flow into our base, which reduces some of our oxygen needs. As you can see, the very light blue oxygen here is high pressure with 1,655 grams. And as it becomes darker, you see there's less oxygen available. So areas where there's high traffic and duplicates, there's less oxygen available because they are constantly using up this oxygen, and it has to flow from high pressure areas into this now low pressure area. We'll have more available oxygen by opening up this space. So let's build a ladder. Tell the duplicates to erase some of the tiles so that there's more room for the air to flow through. You might notice that these tiles here say unreachable build, or unreachable dig, sorry. The reason for this is because your duplicates are only able to reach 4 tiles above the ground. Anything higher than that is out of their reach. I'm going to leave these dig commands on, however, because eventually I'll end up placing a floor here, and rather than having to worry about coming back and replacing the dig command, I can just forget about it. the duplicants will do it whenever it's available. All right, so our oxygen problems are more or less dealt with. We don't have a renewable source of oxygen, but we have plenty of oxygen to last us until we have our food supplies up and ready. So I'm going to start building some farm tiles out to the left-hand side of my base. And I'm going to build 14 farm tiles. The reason for that is because each duplicant requires 3.5 farm tiles worth of mealwood, one of the plants that we can grow, as you can see here, to sustainably maintain that duplicant's hunger needs. This includes cooking the food, so I'll have to build some food preparation stations. In addition, my duplicants, as they're building out these floors, are likely to fall through to the ground. So it's important to make sure that your duplicants have a path that they can take back into your base. Each duplicant can only make a 2-tile high jump. So if a duplicant, because they're not very smart and will often dig out the ground underneath their own feet, ends up falling through the floor as they're constructing, and say they end up over here, you could see that there's a 1, 2, 3 tile wall. A duplicant cannot cross this wall, meaning if any duplicants fall into this water, they will be trapped here and will drown. The reason some duplicants, as you've already seen, have fallen in and gotten out is because I have a pitcher pump available whose floor is 2 tiles high. They can climb up onto the pitcher pump and then climb the 1-tile gap from the pitcher pump to these tiles over here and re-enter the base. So it has to, you need to be very careful, especially when you have pooled water or you're digging under a gap, over a gap, to make sure that your duplicants have some path to re-enter the base. Additionally, you could simply be more careful about making sure the duplicants don't fall by only placing tasks in a specific order so that your duplicants are not able to mess up and hurt themselves. Typically, I find it's not really worth it. You can just let them do. They're pretty resilient. They can fall on the ground and they won't hurt themselves. They'll just get back up and come back to the base. So now that some area has been cleared out, we can see here on the right that there are 2 available mealwood seeds. We've acquired these seeds by harvesting the mealwood as they grow. Earlier in the playthrough, we saw that some of the mealwood was nearly finished growing, and here we can see they're much smaller, and so they've already been harvested. There's a low percentage chance that mealwood that's growing will provide an additional seed each time that it's harvested. The mealwood will stay where it is, it will continue to grow, and you can get potentially infinite seeds and food from these mealwoods as they grow. However, wild mealwood plants grow exceedingly slowly. It takes 12 cycles for a mealwood plant to grow. However, I believe it only takes 3 cycles for a mealwood plant to grow. 3 cycles, yes, for a mealwood plant to grow when you are tending it yourself. Player-planted mealwood plants require nutrients for the plant to survive. They have to have a certain amount of air, which is true even of wild plants, but you also have to supply them with dirt, which is a finite resource. You can eventually build a renewable plant to generate more dirt, but typically it's more effort than it's worth. So I tend to treat my dirt as a finite resource and quickly transition off from dirt-based food supplies at about 200 cycles or so. Now that my farms are mostly available, I'm going to start telling my duplicants to plant the available seeds. And once enough seeds are available that all of these are filled, our base will be fully renewable for food until we run out of dirt, meaning we'll be safe for food production for the next few hundred cycles. I've planted both of my seeds, and there are still 12 available spaces left. I can speed up my ability to get seeds by taking the wild mealwood plants and instead of harvesting them, uprooting them, guaranteeing exactly 1 seed to be produced. This prevents further growth of these mealwood plants, removing an infinite source of food and of seeds, but it drastically increases the speed at which your base can become self-sufficient, and I find it's typically useful as soon as you have your base up and running to harvest these mealwood plants as quickly as possible. So I'm going to do that there, as well as at the bottom of my base. Now that I've covered most of the basics of my base, I believe it's about time that I started optimizing some of my duplicates activities. Here at the top, you can see a tree called Skills. Clicking this allows you to access a large number of unlocks that your characters are eventually able to acquire. Each time you use skill points that slowly become available to your duplicates as they complete tasks and gain experience, they gain access to new abilities and they become more effective and proficient at particular tasks. However, each time that you do this, your duplicates' needs and requirements increase. They don't require additional food or time to sleep or oxygen, but instead they require additional morale. Duplicates who have a low morale or have a morale requirement higher than their actual morale will begin to experience stress. Stress can be seen at the top left of your colony, and the highest stress is usually displayed first. As you can see, all of my duplicates are currently perfectly unstressed. They have 0 stress. If any duplicate reaches 100% stress, they will exhibit some sort of adverse reaction. So, for example, let's see. What is the adverse reaction of Destructive is the adverse reaction of Ellie. So, if this duplicate becomes too stressed, they will start destroying buildings around them, which can seriously impact the ability of your base to perform. Avoiding 100% stress is vital to the functioning of a base, because critical and key systems can be destroyed in seconds by duplicates who become destructive, or duplicates who become stress vomiters, and for example might pollute your good water supply with polluted water. For the first few dozen cycles, stress is almost certainly not going to be much of a concern. Your duplicates are not going to have many skills, meaning their base morale just for being alive will be more than enough to keep them from becoming unhappy. In addition, they won't have too many sources of additional stress, such as fighting enemy critters or becoming damaged or becoming sick. So you usually don't need to worry too much about it yet, which means you are free to allocate your skill points as you wish. Typically, I start with 2 researchers and 1 farmer, which allows me to quickly get past the early stage of getting enough renewable food using mealwood farms. The reason why I choose a farmer is because each mealwood plant, if you check at the bottom, has a base seed harvest chance of 10%, which I believe is the same for wild plants, which is the reason why we only had 2 seeds available, even though we were collecting seeds from 3 and eventually 4 mealwood plants. Having a farmer tend to crops and harvesting the available food allows you to pick up additional seeds when harvesting, or increases the chances of picking up additional seeds. However, it does not change the 1 seed bonus for uprooting a plant, meaning you cannot plant a plant and uproot it with a highly skilled duplicate to infinitely generate more seeds. You have to let the plant fully germinate and harvest it when it's at 100% growth. So I'm going to go to my skills, look for each of my duplicates, check the ones that have the high science rating, such as Turner here. Nicola does not have high science. Ellie has 0 science. So Turner and Nicola have hearts next to their researching, meaning the morale requirements for having higher skills for researching, and in the case of Nicola, art fundamentals, are reduced. So I'm going to choose Nicola and Turner and put them skills in researching, which allows them to gain additional skill points faster, as well as research more quickly. And just to mark them so I don't forget who they are, I'm going to put a researcher hat on with these fancy light bulbs and open steel. Stinky, however, is the duplicate that I chose that would have the farming trait, and does not quite yet have a skill point available, which means I cannot improve his farming, which is what I would like to do. Increasing his farming skill will get me more seeds over time, which is going to be useful, but I have to wait a small period of time before he gets enough experience for a level and the skill point that I need. Ellie, however, somehow has gained enough skill points to get a level up. So I'm going to give her advanced researching as well, just because it'll help her gain even more skill points in the future, and peg her as an advanced researcher. So each of the duplicants goes to the main base structure to put on their hat. And I'm going to tell all of these buildings to start requesting seeds by clicking the main base structure and clicking the pipe symbol tab on the right side of my keyboard. You can see over here a copy settings as well, and a slash symbol. So if I click the slash on my keyboard, I can either click the button or do that, and copy paste the settings of this particular plant onto all the plants at once. And we see the duplicants gather up the seeds and quickly place the available ones. Once the seeds have been placed, you can see at the bottom of these plants a red icon, which typically indicates that there's not enough resources available for what you've requested for that building. This building says it has no seed available, which means there is no seed on the entire map that is accessible to the duplicants at this point that will satisfy the needs of this building. So you have to wait until some harvesting has been done, or you need to dig into an area where you might find a plant. Here's a buried muckroot that has some mealwood, and harvest that mealwood. Alright, so soon, in the next few cycles, I expect that these seeds will become available, and because we have just about enough food to survive that period of time, especially if we dig up our buried muckroots, which I believe have 1,200 or 1,600 kilocalories, which is a substantial portion compared to how much we have. We should be okay for food. So I'm going to move ahead to dealing with oxygen. I'm going to place 2 oxygen diffusers, which are going to be our primary source of oxygen generation for the foreseeable future. So let's place this like this. There's an additional tile there. Remove those additional tiles. Each oxygen diffuser gives you 550 grams per second of oxygen and requires 120 watts of power. If you remember, as I said earlier, each of your duplicants requires 100 grams per second of oxygen, meaning 2 oxygen diffusers giving you 1,100 grams per second can supply 11 duplicants for their oxygen needs. Typically, it's a good idea to have more oxygen production than you need, because as you continue to expand your base, the vacuum that's produced needs to be filled with the oxygen that's available. So even if you have enough oxygen available now, if you maintain a perfectly even oxygen supply to demand, that oxygen will become thinner and thinner spread, and waste products such as carbon dioxide will begin to accumulate. And as they become high pressure, they will begin to invade the areas that you used to have oxygen in. So even if there's enough oxygen for your base, it may all be forced up to the top of your base where your duplicants can't use it, and the base may become filled with unwanted gases such as carbon dioxide, or later on chlorine, or polluted oxygen, or various other things. So right away I'm going to place 2 oxygen diffusers, which will be more than enough for the 8 duplicants that I'll be running the base on for the foreseeable future. Each of these oxygen diffusers requires algae for operation, which you can see in these green tiles. Algae is a more or less non-renewable resource. Technically, you can renew the algae using some more complicated methods, but similar to dirt, it takes a lot of effort. So I tend to treat algae as a non-renewable resource until my base is truly up and running in the mid to late game, a few hundred cycles in, by which point oxygen diffusers are not a very effective source of oxygen. So there's no reason to go back to the algae. Let's choose the blueprint that becomes available every few cycles. Your printing pod, I believe every 3 cycles will print something new, which I forgot to mention when the earlier blueprint became available. And I'm going to choose a new duplicant. Farming is good. Cooking is good, something that we're going to need. Researching is good. Nobody has loud sleeper, so I'm just going to go ahead and choose the cooking duplicate. Alright, so power has quickly run out in our base. Before we had 2 power requesters, 2 research stations, that each only required 60 watts, which you can see by clicking F2, the power tab, meaning only 120 watts was required by your base, and that only happened while the research stations were in use. So your batteries were able to last quite a while before recharging. However, I've just built 2 oxygen diffusers, which try to run all the time, and each of those requires 120 watts at all times, meaning my power requirements have more than just tripled. So I'm going to build some additional batteries to reduce the amount of time that duplicants have to continuously walk back and forth, and allow these oxygen diffusers to fully pressurize the base. Here I'm just going to build through this area with the carbon dioxide. I'll trust that the high pressure of oxygen will keep this carbon dioxide from going into the base while I build. Alright, here we see a potential source of emergency. My duplicants have run down underneath the area that I'd like to build, and already there is no path available for them to come back into the base. Because there's very little oxygen available here and no food, my duplicants could very quickly suffocate and die. As you build, you need to be careful to make sure that your duplicants maintain a path back into your base. So I'm going to deconstruct this tile, making only a 2 tile tie gap so my duplicants can re-enter the base. Now that this whole section has been constructed and there's no reason for my duplicants to go beneath anymore, I feel safe to simply place this tile, and we see that no duplicant has gone into the area with all the carbon dioxide. So now I'm going to build a good number of additional batteries, say 4, connect them all to our power system with wires, and that should reduce the amount of time that our diffusers are not running, as well as reduce the amount of trips that our duplicates need to take to fill up our power supply. And there we have it. We have a base with a renewable source of oxygen for the next few hundred cycles. We have a base with soon to be a fully renewable source of food that will be able to supply all of our duplicants once I add another 4 plants for our 5th duplicant I just added. And we have research and power. In the next videos upcoming, I'm going to be replacing and improving these structures, eventually replacing this food production facility with renewable critter-based food production, as well as much more efficient uses of my duplicants' time by building, say, coal generators, or later on more advanced forms of generators that will produce a lot of power for very little duplicant input. In addition, I'm going to be making videos that will detail how to construct more specific modules in your base. So for example, how to heat crude oil, which you might find at the bottom of your map, into petroleum, which forms a useful power source, or then heat and cool petroleum into natural gas, which is an even more powerful source of power. So that should save me some time during my playthrough videos, having to explain why I'm doing each individual action. If you're interested in seeing more videos in this series, feel free to hit the subscribe button and a like button if you like this video in particular. I'm going to be uploading videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, continuing both this playthrough series as well as the modules mentioned earlier that go more in depth. And have a good day. See you next time.